Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Dear Mr. Atheist. And today I have something a little bit special, or I should say someone a little bit special for you, here to help me tackle Kyle Butt, that is, the apologist, the apologetic Butt, who I like to call Dr. Butt. He's never claimed to be a doctor, but I feel with as much as he must have gone through with a name like his, I'll just make him an honorary doctor for that alone. But joining me today to take on Butt is the wonderful, the awesome, the brilliant Suris. You may have known Suris as Suris the Skeptic. You may know Suris as Suris the Nico. Is that how you pronounce it? Neko?
I want to die. I'm kidding. Well,
Neko,
usually.
You can't start a YouTube video that way. Neko, it's usually pronounced. My apologies. Okay, Neko has a similar sound to naked. Naked Suris, Neko Suris. Neko Suris is here. Neko Suris is here to help me take on the Butt. How are you, Suris?
I am as okay as I can be. If there's one thing I've learned about listening to apologetics, it's like putting a cheese grater in your ear and just twisting it around. So I guess I'm excited
Except
for
that. I don't do that. I don't do that often. And the thing that I would say is annoying about the apologetics of the Christian right is that it's constant repetition over and over and over again. And so I would need to put the cheese grater in my ear more often, I suppose, to have a similar experience.
You need to have all of the surface flesh carved out and just fall out into little chunks, and then you're just like, okay, well, now that everything's raw and the mere idea of air hitting my ear is causing me physical pain to think about, now I know what it's like to listen to apologetics again that don't change.
What if we did like, it'd be like the Sunday Show Home Edition, and it's a board game people can play at home so they can have the experience of getting a call-in show with apologists, and all we send is a cheese grater. I feel like that would work.
It would need
with
to be
instructions of how to insert it into your ear.
It would need to be an oversized one so that you have to try to find a way of logicking that it could in fact fit there, so that it's, at least identically as likely as the Christian God.
That's good. There are definitely people already watching that are thinking, okay, go ahead, get to the video. And so we will do that. But reminder, you can find Suris over at Twitch, twitch.tv/Neko Suris, Neko Suris. And I'm over there at Jimmy Alexander Snow. In fact, had you already known that and been following me, you could have watched this live as we recorded it and listened to the 3 hours or so of absolute nonsense that led up to it. But we titled it saying you're going to get to hear us talk about Mr. Butt. And then we took our time getting to it, but we talked about a lot of good stuff, a lot of fun stories, and a lot of not fun stories.
We didn't stall at all talking about card games.
The Butt. Yu-Gi-Oh didn't come up a lot at all.
Never.
But here we have a video that I'm excited and interested to cover, because you know that all I ever want is a good reason to believe in God if God exists. And here we have Dr. Butt here once more with definitive evidences that there is a God. Now, granted, he tried to do this in the past. You might remember an old video of mine where he talked about all the scientific facts in the Bible and felt that they would have not known to bury their poop just because it smells like poop without that instruction from God, because there is a part of the Bible, for real, that describes that the soldiers were burying their poop. Not in the river, though. Not too close to the river and away from camp where it wouldn't smell. And how would they have figured that out back then without God? And then he also says the word spittle. The spittle. When they get the spittle. And he says it this certain way that I can't get past. The spittle. But
you just get hung up on it.
I really do. I really get hung up on butt spittle. Whew, that is a sentence. Let's I guess start. You ready? I'm ready.
I am, again, cheese grater.
As ready.
I am unfortunately ready.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Matter.
Oh, I've started it too far. Now, I want to try doing it on 1.25 speed. If people feel that he's actually going too fast, those who are watching over on Twitch on the live stream, you can tell me if, but generally speeding up them a little bit is fine, and it helps with our copyright bullshit we have to deal with. Evidence there is a God.
In the beginning was matter. And matter begot the amoeba.
Right. Matter begot the amoeba.
The amoeba begot the worm. The worm begot the fish. The fish begot the amphibian. The amphibian begot the reptile. The reptile begot the lower mammal. The lower mammal begot the lemur. The lemur begot the monkey. The monkey begot the man who imagined God. This is the genealogy of man. That's a verbatim quote from a man named Charles Smith back in the 20s, but still encapsulates the idea of atheism, that this physical world is all that there ever was, all that there ever will be, and all that there is right now.
Do you want to take it, or should I?
I'm going to be the pedantic asshole that begins with, we don't come from amoeba, we share a common ancestor with amoeba. Jesus, unicellular protozoans. That is the word you're looking for. I'm not even that bothered by that part.
You know, I get that people have a sort of colloquial understanding. And so I used to be very about when they'd say we came from monkeys. And it's like, well, no, we have a common ancestor. But actually, our common ancestor with monkeys was a monkey, and we are monkeys today. That's a common misconception amongst atheists who love to go, no, we're not monkeys. We have a common ancestor. Actually, if you were biologically classifying us, we would fall under every modern classification. Now, that doesn't mean we have tails, which is a lot of people go, no, we're not monkeys because we don't have tails. Turns out there are a lot of tailless monkeys.
It also turns out that monkey isn't a scientific term we use to describe, particular series of apes.
Sure, but there's definitely groupings and stuff, and I understand why it's happened in the past. There are going to even be people in comments that are like, no, Jimmy, that's actually wrong. You're actually wrong. Go watch Aaron Ra does an amazing video. He's a biology educator amongst everything else he does on the fact that, yes, actually, as humans, we are monkeys. But I get it. I get why that sort of the amoeba begat the worm, definitely not great. The fish begat the amphibian, which begat the reptile, also not great. But I get this sort of colloquial understanding that they have. The thing that I find the most annoying was when he goes, this atheist idea.
It's not it's not an atheist idea. Exactly. So anybody who watches atheist content on YouTube probably knows about Biologos, right? It's a website that compounds a crap ton of real scientific research into biology, but it contextualizes it as, oh, by the way, you can believe in real demonstrable science and still not say that goes against your Christianity. That's the whole point of that website, is to go let's explain science in a way that isn't wrong. So it's frustrating to me anytime I hear a young earth creationist go through this, because the idea that there is necessarily this dichotomy, all you're going to you're going to, if I were to step my feet back into into Christian shoes, if I were to pretend I'm Christian still, my goal would be to get more people to God, right? That's my end goal. If that's my end goal, lying to people about biology is going to make them think that I'm lying about everything else. So maybe this isn't the right tactic.
But specifically with this atheist idea, the proposal of atheism, especially the way people actually self-identify in society. Of course, we can have the stupid, useless, waste of time argument about philosophy classroom atheism versus the identification label. No one, never ever. And it wasn't super stupid when they did it and everybody else. And it's not super stupid when people care if rocks are atheists or not, because seriously, it matters. It matters a ton if rocks are atheists or not. Oh, but it doesn't matter at all. Anyway, those super stupid arguments, forget all of those. The concept of identifying as an atheist means you have identified either you believe there are no gods or you don't believe that there is a god.
Yeah, there's no proclivity towards biology. It's nothing.
And literally nothing. There are atheists who do not accept evolution. And he's talking about evolution, which is the theory and the conclusion of lots and lots of the scientific method. In fact, perhaps more than any other theory, which sort of blows people's mind when you say, actually, there's more support for the theory of evolution than the theory of gravity, despite the fact that we can, in very short-term micro experiments, demonstrate gravity. I understand why it feels wrong, but the actual amount of evidence for evolution may exceed any other theory in science. And that is why there are atheists who do believe in it. And I would say that any skeptic who is actually practicing skepticism is going to come to the conclusion that evolution isn't just a theory, because the phrase just a theory is so stupidly used. Right. But they're actually going to go with it's a fact, right? But also there are theists who also accept evolution. So even his colloquial way of going, the amoeba begat the, yes, it's crude. Of course he goes with that quote because it's especially useful as a crude quote in front of a group of religious people who don't have a basic understanding and can't do that translation into their brain to what it actually means. But it's a scientific theory. It's not an atheist worldview, despite the fact that some atheists adopt it or accept it, but so do some theists. It's just stupid.
I have unironically met young Earth atheists who have taken seriously the idea, even if they didn't adopt it, but have taken seriously the idea of flat eartherism for at least a little bit. Granted, these people were also, or this person rather, was also a 9/11 truther. So, you know.
Yeah. So as a conspiracy theorist who, as I always say, the conspiracy theorist, in the interest of not believing anything, will then believe everything.
Yeah.
That's literally what a conspiracy. I don't want to believe that which is true. I want to believe that which is the most exciting, sensational, salacious even. Someone wrote no Jimmy, and I have no idea what no Jimmy is short for. Also, I don't know why oath has periods. OATH. Only anal this house.
I was going to say
only
oral, anal, tickling, and I guess hellfire, because that's what you get after all that.
Hedonism.
I guess hedonism's better.
Yeah.
But hellfire is what they think's going to happen after that, to be fair.
Obviously all trans go to heaven. I think that's probably what it stands for.
It must.
Go to being those sort of, because they're smaller words, they're easy to omit. Obviously all trans go to heaven is what it clearly stands for.
He's got such a good understanding of biology to begin with. He must.
Tremendous. We're like 10 minutes in. Let's try some more.
That everything that you see is a product of blind random chance processes over multiplied millions or billions of years, and that you are here because those random chance processes somehow got together and formed your body and mind and everything about you from primordial slime.
Well, first of all, the primordial slime that he's referring to and what he would think of as slime, we're probably thinking of different kinds of slime, because I think most people's understanding of slime is usually a quite alive thing too. But certainly the primordial soup, as some people call it, would also have had zero life, including bacteria in it. But that's where I'm perhaps being a touch pedantic. Where I have another issue is his random chance. We have no idea. In fact, it probably isn't random chance. It may be the case that when you put a planet in the conditions that our planet has, you get life every time, 100% of the time, if you give it enough time to do it. It could be that you get it 50% of the time. It could be 5% of the time. Now, everything in the universe being causeless can then have a feeling of randomness. And I sort of understand why he would like to commit such an equivocation fallacy, because it's much easier to make his point with such. But when you say this random thing, it isn't as though it is truly spontaneous. In fact, it is likely the case that when we understand processes better in the future, we'll be able to start applying general ranges of mathematical probability of, actually, with the Earth having the conditions it has, there's probably this percentage of planets in the universe that have similar conditions. And of those, this percent to this percent likely had life arise with those conditions present. As we learn more, we'll find out it's not so random, very likely.
It's also just, I'm just going to say this. The argument that, like, this is usually some form of fine-tuning argument or some form of, you know, I had to roll dice 1,000 times to make this happen, therefore it was unlikely. Here's the thing. I don't care if something's unlikely. Statistically, if it has happened, its likelihood is now 1. It could have been 0.0000 repeating down the scale before it happened. But now that it's happened, we're working here. Like, if you want to have a very, like, awkward example of this, think about your parents for just a minute. Do you know how your parents met? Okay, what was the likelihood that your parents were going to meet and then conceive you? Okay, cool. I could get into the awkward bit of, like, what's the likelihood that, you know, your sperm specifically fertilized the egg? But ignoring that,
right. Yeah, billions of yeah, sure.
Like, what was the likelihood that your parents' parents met? Not just one set of them, but both sets of them. And now keep pushing that back several generations. You have a bunch of things that were all probably incredibly unlikely to happen, caused by literal random circumstance, and yet you live in a world where they happened. When somebody goes, it's unlikely the world would have been created this way. Okay, cool. It's unlikely that you would have been cocked up out of your, you know, out of your mom. It doesn't matter. It means nothing. You're here now.
I love when they do the exercise of being like, do you know that and they're always pulling it out of their ass because there is no established number yet. But they go, do you know that the chances of life arising out of nothing are 1 in 1 with 1,000 zeros after it? How unlikely is that then? And it's literally like, okay, well, here's an exercise. Go write a number that has 1,001 digits, like you just said. Just go write it. It's going to take you a minute, but you physically can do it. If you want, do it on your keyboard and just at random pecking out numbers. And now you have generated a number that the odds of you creating that exact number are the same as what you say the odds of life arising are. And yet that number exists despite its unlikelihood. You would be saying, if that number was correct, again, it's a bogus thing because we don't actually know what the percentages are. But if your number was correct, you have now done an action that when you take the number you have, not all the numbers you could have, just the one you created, it has the exact same odds of humanity, which you have. Exact same.
Well, not to mention, like, you can compound that and make it even more confusing for them. You can point out that, like, okay, life existing as we understand it, in its current form, let's say that there's whatever that gigantic number is, and we'll say, yeah, you're right, it's that likely to have happened. It's that likely or unlikely. And then you go, so what about the next event after that? That has to be even more unlikely, right?
Sure.
And what about the next event after that? Like, you start the closer you get to the present, the bigger that number is like, you know, it's infinitely more unlikely that you would have been born at all. Isn't that more astounding than life existing at all? Like, isn't that more unlikely? Isn't that...
Which we don't actually know that yet. We don't because we don't know what the number is.
Because we have no way of knowing.
That's the biggest thing.
But if we're just looking at events,
their example,
and granting their likelihood for the event, every subsequent event is more unlikely than the last one because it requires the events from previous.
Right.
It's just uninteresting. Like when you look at that, you just look at this entire series of mathematics and go, that's really boring. I stopped caring.
Yep. So basically we're a minute and a half into this guy's video and all of his premises are terrible, but we'll continue. I thought. There we go.
That's the idea of atheism, that there is no God. A meaning not, theism, Greek word for theos or God, not a God.
Again, remember that most people who self-identify as atheists are simply going to say they don't believe in a God, myself included. I don't believe in a God. I'm only a strong atheist over the proposed gods. I believe that there is sufficient evidence to dismiss even the possibility of the Christian God, the Muslim God, and virtually any other God that's been presented to me, other than gods that are impossible to dismiss, because the fewer details there are about them, the harder it becomes, but the more details you give, the more things you can potentially test. So just not believing is the proposal of most atheists who identify as such, not the there is no God necessarily.
For the one pedantic commenter.
Right now, the United States.
For the one pedantic commenter, local atheism. Now stop typing your comment.
Yeah, just get out.
States of America, 22 million people believe that either there is absolutely no God and they're hard-nosed atheists, or they're agnostic and they say, hey, we're about 98, 99% sure that there's not one, but we can't say if we're absolute 100% sure, but we're going to behave like there's not.
That's not how that works either.
Right. Most people who identify as agnostic either think that the I don't know if there's a God position is what agnosticism is, which a lot of people do adopt, and they'll go like, well, I'm not an atheist because I'm saying I don't know. And then it's like, yeah, you fucking idiot. So do most atheists. But fine. Sorry, I don't mean to call some of you who are watching right now fucking idiots. It's more of an out of frustration, out of a, why haven't you gone and looked at the labels you say you identify with and make sure you're using the right one? Most people who identify as, again, with this culturally, how you identify as an atheist or an agnostic, I would identify myself as an agnostic atheist, except over specific gods, which basically just says I both do not believe in a God, and the proposition of does any God exist, I would actually call unknowable. But I certainly have no knowledge of a God and therefore agnostic. And to the proposal of if there is a God, I actually think it's an unknowable proposition, considering people have given such creative characteristics to gods, such as they're literally unknowable. I mean, it's sort of does the work for you at that point. I was pausing in case you wanted to.
If it's literally unknowable, there's also a fucking philosophical terms. There's also non-cognitivism for that one, but again, that's not important.
Indeed.
About 7% of the adult population right now is either atheist or agnostic. Now, to put that in a little perspective.
What number did he say?
I think he said 7%.
Of the adult population right now is either atheist or agnostic. Now, to put that in a little.
I don't think that's correct, but we'll let him have it.
Little perspective. If you're driving through Birmingham on a Friday night at about 5 o'clock or 6, you understand you've made a serious logistical miscalculation, because you don't want to be driving through Birmingham at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, because, yeah, I mean, you're talking, it is rush hour, and that hour is pretty literal, or maybe even more, and you have approximately, if you were to take all of the people in the area of Birmingham and Bessemer and the surrounding areas, Trustville, etc., you've got right at 1 million people. Now, what?
Jesus Christ!
Why does it matter? Why does all of this matter? Okay, so hold on. Can I just say?
I think he hasn't gotten to his point yet. I'm just sitting here going like, why? What is this about Birmingham and 1 million?
It sounds like, to me, it sounds like talking down to your audience. Like, you say 22 million people, 7% of the United States population. That's as far as you need to go with most people. Instead, he's going, okay, my audience is probably incredibly stupid. And why wouldn't they be? They're listening to me, of course. So I need to explain to them how numbers work. I need to get to the basic idea of how to think and conceptualize percentages that all of these adults in my audience certainly can't do. I have to explain that to them.
All of them own 2 cars and they're driving both of them at the same time, and you don't know how that happened, but that's the case. And so you got 1 million people in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, imagine this. Good to see you guys. Come on in. Glad you're here. Y'all come on down to the front row. There's always room on the front row. Always room on the front row. Got 1 million people in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, that is 1 million people with infants and toddlers, etc. We're not talking about 1 million adults.
Oh my God.
Why did that matter?
Now, multiply Birmingham, Alabama by 22 cities the size of Birmingham, Alabama. And it's filled, each one of those cities are filled with adults. And that's how many atheists we have in the United States of America today, atheists and agnostics. Of course, it's the most that we've ever had in the history of our country.
Neat.
I am exhausted. What an exercise to find out, to try and visualize. First of all, humans aren't even really capable of conceptualizing 5,000 people. What about 5,000 people actually is or looks? You could say like, I have been at a 5,000 cap theater this many times and I've seen what the size of that is. But to truly conceptualize the concept of 5,000 independent thinkers and all of that, think as in thinkers independent from each other, not necessarily. Right. We're not capable of most big things. We aren't really capable of conceptualizing years outside of maybe, well, when you're younger, you can really only conceptualize like maybe a few decades. But at some point in your life, you'll have a concept of roughly 100 years. Maybe you could understand up to double that. But we can't even really conceptualize the size of 1,000 years. That's why so much is lost on us when you really think about how much has exceptionally changed in the last 1,000 years versus the last 5,000 versus the last 10, and how there's this sort of compounding idea that gets crazier and stranger, and yet development actually spreads apart. We can't conceptualize large numbers anyway, even if you do the utterly relatable, and I'm sure it's relatable to these people, but I'm just sitting there going like, okay, I'm from Denver, right? Denver has horrible traffic. And when I'm in traffic, I'm thinking of how bad traffic is around me. So let's say there's 1 million people, which I don't think it's that bad in Denver, but as far as how much movement there is, it's probably very similar. I know there's 1 million people in Denver, but not in traffic. You're only thinking of the cluster of let's go charitably and say the 100 cars that are most both affected by you, behind you, and are affecting you in front of you. And that's very generous. Suddenly going like, wow, if I just imagine my experience of traffic and multiply it by 22, that's how wow, what an exhausting and stupid exercise, and something that you took far too long to get around to, Dr. Butt.
I don't want to think about traffic. I live near Atlanta. I don't want to do that. That feels like a bad time.
Denver got super bad in the last few years because of the mass, and unlike some other cities, they were not. I'm not going to say other cities were necessarily ready, but a lot of other cities were more ready for influxes of people. They had excess of highway, and meanwhile, Denver still has major highways with only 2 lanes, and millions of people started funneling into it. So it got real bad. I don't miss that. Even though the Austin area has not great traffic, I'll be in the Austin traffic and people will complain about it, and I'll be like, guys, you still get places in roughly 40 minutes at the worst. Like, you can get from anywhere to anywhere in under 40 minutes. I've taken 2 hours to drive 10 miles before in Denver, multiple times. Like, let's calm the fuck down.
Anyway. The fastest.
Do you want to keep talking about traffic?
No. I live in the woods now, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
No traffic here.
There you go. 0. Oh, man.
Religion, put it in quotes, in the United States of America. And we are dealing with this idea of unbelief to a greater degree than we ever have before in our lives, and especially the generation that is coming up now from about 13 years old to 18 years old.
Yes, as science information has developed and become more of a thing, it is true that unbelief is becoming more popular. It may not be true as much as atheists hope it is and skeptics hope it is, because it may be that the obvious social issues with Christianity and things like Islam or religions across the world, the horrible impact those things have on social issues drive people away because they don't want to. There's sort of a more pressing, let's not be on the wrong side of history now that history is super accessible like it wasn't in the past. Yeah. And presumably the future will be more accessible. A record of what choice I make is going to be kept. And that may be pushing people away from Christianity, but also into other false religious ideas, astrology, Wiccanism, paganism, whatever you like. People who I have great deep friendships with. I know Suris does too. But when you say people are leaving, there's a lot of non-skeptical atheists going to paganism. Wouldn't be an atheist religion, an atheist religion, because that's still a God-based one. Mm-hmm. There are forms of Wiccanism that are still spiritual or magical that don't invoke any gods. There's certainly astrology would be another supernatural, ethereal, power-based deal and all of these things have methods of categorization, methods of things that turn into bad things otherwise for society, but they're not as severe as something like the genocides you can associate with Christianity. Basically, when I sit as a skeptic and I hear about the rise in unbelief, I notice that amongst the people who are embracing science more and skepticizing more, skepticizing, is that even a term? I'm going to go with it is. People being more skeptical is not growing at the same rate as this belief to unbelief rate is growing. And that's a little disappointing. I wish it wasn't.
It's just where you've got people leaving Christianity on its own and then them going, aha, that means they're atheist. Okay, so to you, there's just Christians and atheists then? Neat. Muslims are atheists now. I'm glad we got there.
Yeah. I think someone, Jasa. Wait, Jasa or Jasa? Which one was it? It's not NASA, it's Jasa.
It's Jasa.
Jasa's right. It is Jasa?
It's Jasa.
Jasa rhyming with NASA?
Yeah.
Okay. Jasa mentioning in the Twitch live chat that Denver has 715,000 people. When you are saying Denver, you are saying basically the city of Denver. When we're talking about traffic, it certainly includes those suburbs. So when I'm talking about how big Denver is, I'm talking up to Westminster and Thornton, down to Littleton, over at least to Lakewood, maybe not all the way into Golden, but not some way into Golden. And then obviously you have Aurora on the other side. And so I'm talking about that greater area, which has a few million people, because that's still a very small physical area. So that's what I was saying. It is like NASA. Yay, JASA. All right. I got you. Yes, Denver Metro. Indeed. All right. Audio is behind, but I hope that it's in sync when you see it. Let's see. Let's keep going.
Okay, now there's another idea. You've probably heard of it too. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God divided the light from the darkness, and the light he called day, the darkness he called night.
And then he made the sun and the moon. Don't forget.
I like how he's having to go over the basic concept of Genesis now, because once again, his audience is needing to be talked down to.
To me, it's just funny though. Again, the sun and the moon are made after light and dark are separated. So if you're saying I'm separating light and dark, and the dark is night and the light is day, boy, that's a lot of day and nights that have nothing to do with day and nights. Inside a dark cave, it is night all the time. Inside a lit home, it is day all the time, which technically our brains actually somewhat agree with. You know, we can have trouble sleeping with our relationship to lights and whether or not it sort of fades down and we experience the concept. It's to do with people's circadian rhythm and all of that. So, there is something to all of that. However, the separating the day and the night prior to a light source, first of all, where'd the light come from? He said, let there be light, and it just was. I was a photographer. Which direction was this light shining from, and what was its original source? I need to know.
The light was I think the apologetic that's usually used there is like the light was God, and then he replaced himself with the sun afterwards. And
Did he just hang out there, or was he walking around just shooting light beams everywhere?
Or he was just sitting there like. Have you played Katamari Damacy?
No.
Okay, so this is going to be lost on you, but hopefully somebody will get it. He's just sitting there with like his light crotch, like the king of the cosmos is in Katamari Damacy, just like, behold my pelvic region, it lights up the universe.
Excellent. All right, I'm on board again then. I'm back to Christianity. If we've got a sun crotch, I'm in.
An evening and a morning, day 1. And then subsequently, day 2, God creates the expanse or the sky and space. Day 3, the flowers, the grass, and the trees. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, birds.
Again, day 4, sun, moon, and stars, but day 1 was light and dark. I just want to keep pointing that out. And before the sun, moon, and stars,
he made the plants.
He creates the plants
that can't survive. At all.
In that terrible temperature situation. And you got to love the expanse when it's literally like, as far as life on Earth goes. First of all, expanse didn't mean what, at least this guy's not a flat earther talking about the firmament and all that shit. But as far as life on Earth goes, mention the fucking atmosphere. Jesus.
We don't need an atmosphere here. Don't you understand? It's the firmament, and it encapsulates everything. And they don't want you going to the top of the dome.
And it's made of glass, for sure.
Humans, and on the 7th day, he ceases his creative activity. The idea of creation, that there is a supernatural, meaning non-material, God in heaven that is intelligent, all-powerful, and eternal, that spoke
Wait a minute. I have a hang up.
Yeah.
He just said supernatural just means non-material, so thoughts are supernatural to him.
Well, not really, because I think most materialists would say we might have an experience that feels very non-material, but thoughts are technically material in that.
I mean,
still your brain shooting signals. It's still molecules and electricity.
Like a synapse firing causes the thought itself, but like the concept of an idea is then a form of supernaturality based on the terrible way he's doing this metaphor.
It's not a way I would approach it, because I get what you're saying, that the idea does sort of exist outside of the person having it. It still continues to, in this sort of immaterial way, existentially, it's been put out in the universe and others might adopt it and can recall it later, but it's still extremely materially dependent. So I wouldn't be the direction I would take my my counter apologetics, but I see the point. Is what I'm at. It is very interesting the way you have some people that are almost doing our work for us. I feel like, and Kyle Butt kind of gets that way, where it's like, hey, here's what the science says, and says something that's not. Again, he uses the easy quote minds that are like, yeah, that does sound rather crude. But I can still imagine somebody sitting in this audience who has even a small exposure, like a freshman biology course, just going like, no, wait, hang on a second. Go back to that thing that you were saying. There's the
about
explanation.
The worms
but
and the amoebas.
Yeah. And now you're on to Harry Potter. I actually think I kind of thought what you were saying before. I was like, oh, he's about to debunk this because it makes too much sense. And then you didn't. You just said, wow, I got it. Here's what I got for you. A magic wand. I happen to have a magic wand that I made myself right next to me. This is useful. I've got a magic. I was holding it upside down at first. Boy, the detail not caught very well in this window. This just sort of looks like a stick, but it's more than a stick.
At first, it looked like something else when it was just like not fully in frame and we couldn't judge the size.
That's right. Well, I did just make a dick-themed one and mailed it to Godless Engineer, but that's an upcoming episode. I did create a dick-themed wand for him. Back in here.
And so ultimately, those are the two ideas you have. That there is an intelligent, supernatural creator, or there is nothing but this physical world, and you need to decide which one of those is true.
What do you think's about to come? What do you think is about to happen?
I think what's about to happen is I'm going to scream. Like,
I think he's trying to set up Pascal's wager. Here are your two options. God in heaven or not.
I don't know if he's going to go full Pascal's wager. It feels like it's going to be some form, like if he doesn't bring hellfire into it, then it's not quite Pascal's wager to me yet.
Right, if there's not a threat.
But if he's just sticking in with the look at the trees argument, like, look at all of this. Atheists would have you believe it's all random chance, but if you look at the perfect way a cancer cell consumed your grandma.
Right. Like, with absolute perfection. My God, and she was getting old. There was no need for her anymore.
Now here's what we're told by the modern scientific community. We're told that one of these ideas is scientific and one of them is faith-based. Now, when they say faith...
Well, yes, but not as an insult, by the way.
It's just as a description.
Community doesn't go like... Right. It literally goes, we only handle science stuff, so we're over here with this. And by the way, you've presented a false dichotomy. You can believe in every bit of science and then decide somehow your God was behind it all. Again, there are lots of Christian believers who don't have this dichotomy that you say they clearly have. You see the two at odds, which means you're a little bit more fundamentalist, technically a little bit more biblically accurate, because fundamentalism is a bit more biblically accurate. I mean, it's literally what the definition of fundamentalism is. You're just driving, I feel like, people away and trying to fill those gaps, Jimmy. That's right.
Faith-based, what they mean is not rational, it's not backed by evidence, it's not something that you can prove, it's something that, and generally speaking, they'll tell you this, it's something that gullible people accept from their leadership without critically thinking through.
Isn't it weird that he says that as a leader talking to gullible people?
Right. Right. But he's lumping things together. He just said that's the message from science, which it isn't.
science doesn't talk about
people.
human gullibility in that way.
Right. I would definitely talk about the scientific basis for which evolution has been proven. I would certainly say that religion especially, and by the way, it's not only the gullible, it's the what's the word that I'm blocking that's a really obvious word? The vulnerable. It definitely preys upon the vulnerable. It's not just I'm just presenting mine and you pick one or the other. It's your life's in shambles. Here's a way you can dedicate your life to something I can't prove. You'll get your rewards after you die. Doesn't sound like a scam to me at all. And we'll just be taking a portion of your income for the rest of your life and control the very things you do and the relationships you have. I'm Dr. Butt.
And they'll say that this idea of atheism is the science-based system, and this idea...
Nope. Atheism is not science-based, period.
This is a category error. Atheism is a conversation you're having about a theological concept. Science doesn't say jack grab all about God. It's categorically separate.
Right. Atheism in and of itself is much like the concept of something being amoral. You have these options where people think very binarily that an action is either moral or immoral, but there's actually this third middle option of amoral. It might have nothing, there could be something, an action that you can do that has nothing to do with, it's not a positive or a negative action. It doesn't have a positive morality or a negative morality. It simply has nothing to do with it. Now, atheism has no scientifically contradictory ideology because atheism
no ideology
doesn't have an ideology. Right. It lacks the ideology part. So to say that it isn't science-based is like to say, or that it is science-based would be like to just take any random fucking concept and just say like blue is science-based. What?
Did you know playing video games is science-based because you play them on a computer that science made, despite the fact that people who don't believe in science and don't exercise it can just play video games?
Right. If you want to talk about consequences of like, I mean, we could do sort of in the exercise you just did, we could talk about what scientifically delivers the ability to play a video game and even what might attract one type of person to video games more than another. We can talk about all of those things and have those in-depth things. But the actual concept, so in this case, that the more scientifically literate you are, the tendency of you to become atheist goes up. It is not 100%. Some of the most scientifically literate people in the world are still tragically theistic. Yeah, that is true, though, that you become more likely, especially if you go into certain fields. If you go into biology, you're more likely to become an atheist than if you go into chemistry, for example. Though chemistry, not without a good number increased based on.
I think it's like astronomy has the lowest rate of deconversion. When I checked before.
It's actually astrology that has the.
Oh well, if we're talking about sciences, not.
Then why
bullshit.
Is it called astrology? It does sound like, man. I'll tell you, for a long time in high school, I didn't know which one was which. Which one's the one that's the science, and which one's the one that's the calendar shit?
Man, I hate to tell you that you're not the only one that mixed up those two terms. So there's actually a couple of comments from like videos from the beginning of my channel where I got them mixed up on accident because just like it didn't occur to me that they were different for some reason, and just
yeah.
I'm just like, oh, that's embarrassing.
We both had that because I've mentioned astrology actually does cause harm, and I'm willing to have those longer conversations if there's a demand for it. And the whole reason I know that is because I didn't give a fuck about astrology until I didn't pay it any mind as a professional skeptic, and people were like, hey, why are you skipping this? Because here is the specific ways it's either harmed me, it's harmed other people, here are these studies, here are the ways in which it crosses over with other industries and makes people more primed to be preyed upon those industries. Here is how individuals categorize each other, and it literally creates a system of bigotry on the basis of, because what system that
I can't date a Taurus. I can't do
right. What system that creates a universal are the Pokemon Taurus is on there? No, I'm kidding. That creates a universal and seemingly arbitrary or universal force that categorizes people into separate categories. When has that ever gone wrong? When I ask you, when? Yeah, and so it's literally in my ignoring of astrology that I have become vehemently anti-astrology, as people basically did convince me that my thinking it was so not a big deal. Because if you look at earlier videos of mine, I'm going to say, like, you know, and there are those religious beliefs that the only thing that is negative about them, the only harm they cause, is that they might perpetuate the idea that faith is reasonable. You know, your things like astrology. And then I'm getting messages from people like, here's how my parents actually ruined my life with astrology. Mm-hmm. Here's how this happened. Yeah. Tons of these, granted, anecdotes. But then you can actually go and look out if you're interested, and you can find lots about especially the multi-billion-dollar industry, which if something is not true and it generates billions of dollars, that's just straight up capitalistic harm. That's straight up predatory if we want to talk about the harms. But we're here to talk about not astrology, despite the fact that that's what the A in that oath stands for, I'm pretty sure.
But I thought that meant we were going to talk about Uranus.
Uranus. That joke is flawed from its foundation. It's not pronounced Uranus. I was devastated the day I found that out, but it's true. It's not even pronounced that way. But it has become so ubiquitous that I can remember teachers pronouncing it Uranus, not realizing the joke form had permeated into actual society, even though it's Uranus.
Remember, all words are made up. None of this matters.
That's true. So for our purposes, it's Uranus, and here's more but.
Of creation is the faith-based, gullible, irrational system.
Correct.
And then they'll say, hey, don't we all want to be reasonable and science and fact and evidence based? So what we really want.
That's a good idea. Again, not anything to do with atheism, more skepticism. What's that?
And so we could do that. Let's just, you know.
I'm down.
If somebody's not being reasonable and not using science to, you know, figure things out, then maybe learn a little bit about the scientific method, learn a little bit about how to go through things logically, you know, step by step. Does A lead to B? Does B lead to C? Why the fuck are you over here on Q? Stop doing the Q thing.
For real, stop doing the Q thing, right-wingers. Jesus Christ. Stop doing the Q thing. I'm making a different political point.
I'm making the exact same one. I was just leading to it terribly.
There we go. Good.
What I want to do is just look at the idea of, is there evidence for one of these two ideas? And if there is evidence, where does that evidence point? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that evidence points overwhelmingly to the idea that there is a supernatural, all-powerful God. But what I want you to do and understand is I'm going to take the evidence that the atheistic scientific community recognizes as true, and I'm going to apply it to the idea of creation.
Okay.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change what evidence means, and I'm going to admit to you beforehand that I'm going to use cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias to show you that the conglomerate of information and its most reasonable conclusion, that then once you conclude, you figure out ways to test against so that you can disprove a proposition if it is untrue. I'm going to skip all the disprove part, and what I'm going to do is actually go, the specific information that I've picked out only leads to my conclusion, and that's the honest way to do it. Yee-hoo!
This sounds like an easy way to say, I'm going to teach you what a goalpost is. Now I'm going to teach you how to move it.
Yeah. And once we're all finished at the end of it, that's good. Once we're all finished at the end of it, have you all heard of NFTs? Because I have an opportunity from every member of this congregation, but I do not think you are gullible.
Now, one thing that we're often told is, well, you don't even get to say the word science in the same sentence as God, because God is not a scientific idea, because you can't do an experiment on God. You can't touch, see, taste, hear, or smell God. And so if you...
But I mean, I've never said you can't say it in the same. In fact, I would love for someone to come and say, hey, I have a scientific experiment with which you can prove God. I'd be very excited. But half of these people don't know what science actually means. A lot of them go with... and the science... I love when they start a sentence with, okay, the science says such and such is such and such and such and such, and that's just common sense. And it's like, which one is it, you dipshit? You just said you were bringing me science, and then you told me you brought common sense. And guess what? Here's a fucking wild goddamn concept. Look throughout history and how well common sense has suited anybody. Common sense evolves as understanding evolves, and understanding has evolved most through science. Fuck.
Also, just easy to note, whenever somebody says common sense, they're usually just meaning things that agree with how I see the world, because all common sense is just, it's whatever prejudices you had leading up to that exact moment. That's your common sense.
Right, and that you think that you're certain other people in mass would agree with, too.
Look, I'm just here to tell you that you can't touch God, but he sure can touch you.
That's right. That's right. Deeply.
You don't have the thing that you're talking about, and you can't measure and touch and see and do things to this, whatever it is. It's not even a scientific idea. And here's why they say that.
Well, mostly because, I mean, there's some things missing here, but colloquially it's true. And so you do have to separate yourself out.
Like
you have to say science does certain things. It doesn't prove things, though, like that the color orange is the most jealous one. Because that's a nonsense phrase.
It's this lovely thing called category error. And I love it when people get upset at people trying to be honest by not engaging in category error. Like, hey, if we want to talk about theology, that's conversation A. If we want to talk about science, that's conversation B. If I try to use conversation A and conversation B interchangeably in any way that's not just like metaphor, I'm the one being dishonest. I just wish that people like Butthead over here would actually take that seriously and go, no, it's okay to have these things in different categories. And it's, again, if I were to pretend that I'm a Christian for a minute, it's even more beneficial because then people don't smell your bullshit as quickly.
Suris, be reasonable. It's Dr. Butthead. Okay.
Because the idea of science has been redefined in the past 150 years to be something it never was or never was meant to be.
What?
Let me tell you what I mean. Historically, science has been the quest for the truth.
What?
And that's it. Put a period.
I'm going to need a citation on that, bud.
Source, trust me, bro.
Yeah, there's a level of their utility for which that's almost honest. The way that they go, well, science used to believe the earth was flat. And then it's like, no, people who said they reported on science, that they were somehow scientific authorities said that. Science has certainly never made the claim that the earth is flat, ever, because that's not how science works. Well, science is the literal performance of the scientific method. That's what science is.
Moreover, if you
Period. Full stop right there.
Even if you were to be super generous and grant that science at one point said this, if you did that, which you shouldn't, but if you did, then you would also have to admit that science self-corrected for that. How did it do that? Oh, right, the peer review process of the scientific method. What a weird concept. It's almost like having self-correcting mechanisms in your method is an incredibly useful tool. Wow.
Yeah,
I mean, you learn.
Even if you want to do the stupid thing of always using the literal dictionary definition, you have the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment, which sort of alludes to, using the terms that was in there, the scientific method. But historically, we just called anybody a scientist who said something and we all agreed it was true. That was science. You just love that his whole thing is, I'm going to prove to you that actually this is the more scientific thing.
He
now,
should have walked
for the
in with a
sake of this
lab
argument,
coat.
all I'm going to need you is to just change your definitions and agree with me on everything after that change of definitions. As you mentioned, here's how to dig up a goalpost and move it.
It's been the search for the truth. In fact, that's what the word means. It's a Latin word that means to study and find the truth. Now, in the last 150 years, that definition has been changed, and they say it is a quest for naturalistic explanations.
I don't agree with either of his things. But also, literal translations of words do not constitute definitions.
So the
either.
Latin word originally meant knowledge, knowing, expertness, or experience. I see nothing about a fucking quest.
Yeah.
I see zero.
For knowledge.
What is your quest? Knowledge. I like it more than my Ferraris.
Yeah, the word agenda is Latin for list of things to be done, but I call that a to-do list, and my agenda is more like my itinerary. I just literally looked up like random fucking Latin words, and it's like, yeah, all words that have a Latin definition don't necessarily then abide by strictly what that literal translation is. And there, a literal letter A example, agenda, apparently in Latin more literally means to-do list, and yet we use it for time management. Something very similar, but also different, because I literally have both. I have my agenda and my to-do list, and they're technically separate, but
my agenda is to be
page.
Productive. My to-do list is how I plan on doing that thing.
Yeah, well, and then let's not forget that I'm a part of the gay agenda, which is a totally other. Oh man, there's so many, but the Latin, and they've been changing that phrase, them gays and them queers. Gosh dang them gay queers. Let's see if we can get through the first 10 minutes, and we'll call that part 1.
And so they have defined out of the picture any supernatural activity. Used to, it was, we want to find the best answer. Now it is, we want to find the best answer as long as it's not supernatural. Now, let me tell you.
Yeah, no, that's not it. It's literally, as science goes, the way the scientific method works, we would only be able to test the natural world. Because if you want to talk about definitions, supernatural would mean it is untestable. So in fact, science doesn't even say because we only, that's materialism, because we only can test the natural world, therefore only the natural world exists. It says if the answer, we're going to go with what answer we can find. Either there's no answer or an answer that science is incapable of finding.
I think the
like
best
those are
way,
the other options.
The best way to approach a situation like this for me is generally going to be, all right, let's talk about something supernatural. Anything whatsoever. Now you provide me an experiment that we can do to measure or test this thing, because part of science is repeatability. So we should be able to do this ideally once or twice, if not a handful of times. So let's talk about a supernatural thing. You give me a way we test for this.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, will you admit it's not science? Or will you simply go, it's a different kind of science, a special kind?
Right. This guy's just stuck on very simple. And again, he's going to prove it as long as you just change your understanding of reality.
How that runs into a real problem. You guys understand forensics, you understand forensic science, where you come on a scene and you don't know who or what did the thing, and you need to find how this happened.
Coming on the scene is a way forensic science will find you.
Suppose that you go up to a person and the person says, I'd like to commission you to do something for me. We have found an apple, and the apple has a big chunk out of it.
Yeah.
And we want you to arrive at how you think this chunk came out of that. We want you just to find the best answer you can, except you can't say that a human did it. You can give us any answer you want, but you can't say it was a human.
So just imagine a situation where we actually eliminate things that would exist within that science. And clearly this is absurd, because if this was an actual metaphor, there would be no way to know that humans actually exist at all. And so when we come to you with that forensic science, we're actually saying you can't say that a unicorn bit it, would be the actual better metaphor, because we have no reason to believe that unicorns bit it and no way to actually test. And you can't actually do a test because we don't know what unicorn teeth shapes fucking look like. The moment we would be able to test for that, it would no longer be out of the scope of forensic science. I do not understand a goddamn word I'm saying.
You know,
this is just stupid. If you have to spend this much time explaining before you're going to give proof that there's a God, explaining why you can't give proof there is a God, I dare say your exercise by which this video is titled is completely useless.
It's agitating because it's not... So, you and I both, we talk for a job. I feel like we managed to get out, when talking about literally Nothing at all. Absolutely zero content stuff. We managed to get out more meaning than 5 minutes of his preamble in the same amount of time.
Yeah, unless I'm like, you know, plugging my Patreon, patreon.com/Mr. Atheist or Dear Mr. Atheist. I don't know. There's a link in the description. Yeah. Usually, unless I'm promoting and shilling myself out, of course. That's usually true.
I have no idea what that's like. Something Magic Spoon sponsorship. Something Patreon. Anyways.
There you go. Yeah. We do a lot of you're right. We talk for a job. I do a lot of talk jobs. I also work with my hands a lot for a job. So yeah, I'm doing talk jobs and hand jobs. And this guy is the one that is totally fucking his audience. Anyway.
God, you had every ability to say you were doing an oral job and a hand job, and then you...
Well, but an oral job, so I was already going through that when you were saying your thing. I was like, how am I going to do this? And then I was like, well, there's no way in which I blow for a living. I mean, I literally do blow for a living, but that's more of a negative term. So anyway, that's why I decided I was going to pull in hand and make it about talk jobs and hand jobs. I don't know. Let's see. I don't want to break an hour with this once we cut into everything, but we may have already, or maybe we're at an hour. So
we are 1 minute and 23 seconds over an hour.
Are we? I think where we actually started from when I did my little welcome back might be right at about an hour. So that's part one. That was part one. We're going to continue on in a separate episode. That was part one of responding to Kyle Butt's evidences that there is a God. So far, we are 8.5 minutes in of preamble saying I'm going to prove there's a God, but do remember that I can't prove there's a God. Don't forget, you can catch Neko Suris over on Twitch. I am also over on Twitch. Those are great things. You can subscribe to both of our Patreons. That goes a long way as well. Links and everything will be down in the description. Thank you for watching. And now we fade to black.
Insert end of video tagline here, everybody.
And now we unfade from black. Here, actually.